The entire trauma ward froze cold when three little girls locked eyes on a quiet nurse in Bay 4 and whispered a name that wasn't supposed to exist anywhere outside a sealed top secret file locked away by federal order 14 years ago. For over a decade, that nurse had made herself a ghost, smaller shifts, zero drama, no paper trail connecting her to who she used to be. She'd picked a sleepy little hospital in a town nobody from her old life would ever think to look, and she wore silence like a second skin, day in and day out. But kids don't know the meaning of classified. Kids only know what Daddy told them at bedtime like it was a fairy tale. So when the Admiral's triplets looked up at the woman adjusting their father's 4 and said those two words out loud, every wall Maya Tran had spent years building around herself came crashing down in an instant. If the story's already got its hooks in you, do me a solid, smash that subscribe button and stick around till the end. Because trust me, this ride goes places you won't see coming. Drop a like if you're feeling it and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Alright, let's get into it. Maya Tran walked through the doors of Callaway Bay Medical Center at 6:43 every single morning, 17 minutes ahead of her shift, same as clockwork. Nobody asked her to. Nobody even noticed. She showed up early because early meant quiet, and quiet was the only place left where she still felt like herself. She'd throw on her scrubs in the locker room, tie back her dark hair with the same beat-up elastic she kept in her bag, and pour herself a cup of break-room coffee so burnt it tasted like it had been sitting there since the last election cycle. She'd sip it by the window overlooking the ambulance bay, watching the Northern California sky shift from gray to that pale orange that only shows up early on the coast. Callaway Bay wasn't some big city. It was the kind of town people ran to when they wanted to disappear, retire, or start over. One real hospital, a couple of urgent cares, a fishing industry on its last legs, and a population that leaned older and quieter than anywhere south of it. Maya had picked this place on purpose, the same way somebody picks a hiding spot in a game they're desperate to lose. She worked the Trauma Unit 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and after 3 years, she knew that ward inside and out, who ran late, who was sharp, who was just coasting through their shift. She knew the suction line in Bay 3 had a busted pressure valve that maintenance had ignored 4 separate times, and she'd learned to work around it without anybody even asking. But what 3 years hadn't taught her was how to get Dr. Garrett Morrow to treat her like a professional instead of a piece of furniture that occasionally had the nerve to speak up. Morrow ran trauma surgery at Callaway Bay, 51 years old, silver-haired, the kind of guy who'd been told he was exceptional so many times it had hardened into fact in his own head. Big-name East Coast training, published papers, conference talks, a photo on his office wall shaking hands with a former governor that he name-dropped way more than he probably realized. In Maya's professional read, he was a great surgeon when things went the way he expected, and dangerous the second they didn't. She'd flagged it once to the nursing director, Pet Okafor, carefully, professionally, with real examples and timestamps. Pet had nodded like she was already rehearsing her comeback before Maya even finished, then told her Morrow had the department's full trust and Maya's job was to support, not evaluate. Maya said of course and went right back to work, but she never forgot that conversation, the way you never forget a bridge you crossed before you knew it was already cracked. That morning started like any other. A fever spike Maya caught before the day's shift even clocked in. A gallbladder discharge she smoothed over with a nervous daughter hovering nearby. By 9 o'clock she'd done the work of 3 people and nobody had looked at her for more than 30 seconds straight. That was the deal. Then at 9:22, the overhead paging system cut through everything. Incoming trauma, multi-vehicle collision, 1 critical, male, mid-50s, blunt chest trauma, blood pressure crashing, 11 minutes out. Maya was moving before the announcement even finished, prepping the bay, checking the crash cart, confirming the blood warmer. Resident Dr. Priya Anand jogged in pulling on gloves, and Maya briefed her in under a minute. Chest trauma, unstable pressure, could be a collapsed lung, could be cardiac bruising, could be a fluid buildup crushing the heart, prep for all 3. Morrow strolled in 3 minutes later, unhurried, chin up like his presence alone was supposed to fix things. His eyes swept right past Maya like she was part of the wallpaper. "What do we have?" he asked, not really a question, more a statement dressed up like one. Maya gave him the same rundown. He nodded once, already deciding her words were a courtesy, not information. "We'll work him up standard," he said. "Echo chest film, see what we're dealing with." Maya said nothing and went back to checking the equipment. At 9:34, the ambulance doors burst open, and in came a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s, unconscious, scarred forearms that told a story about a rough life somewhere far from clean hospitals. The paramedic rattled off the report at full speed. High-speed rear-end collision, blood pressure crashing despite fluids, a wife on scene with minor injuries following in another car. And he paused like he wasn't sure how to say the next part. 3 little girls, about 7 years old. They wheeled him straight to the trauma table, and Maya was already there, hands moving fast, checking the 4 lines the paramedics had placed. She put her stethoscope to his chest. Breath sounds uneven, the left side clearly weaker than the right. She moved to his heart, and there it was, a sound just slightly muffled, like it was coming through an extra layer that shouldn't be there. "Dr. Morrow," she said, "breath sounds are unequal, left side's down. Heart sounds are muffled." Morrow barely glanced up from the paramedics' field report. "Get me the portable echo," he said to the room. Priya already had the probe in hand. Maya stayed at the head of the bed, tracking his numbers, systolic 97, down from 102 just minutes earlier, and that kind of drop in her book was bad news. The echo image came up, and Maya's stomach dropped with it. Fluid pooling around the heart, not massive yet. But there, a dark stripe where there shouldn't be one. "Could be tamponade," she said, calm and factual. Morrow tilted his head at the screen, then shrugged it off. "Effusion. We'll watch it. Pressure's dropping, we're running fluids." "Fluids won't fix tamponade," Maya said. The room went dead silent for a beat too long. Morrow turned to her with that particular brand of icy patience that's really just contempt in a lab coat. "Miss Tran, I appreciate the input. I've handled thousands of chest traumas. I'll determine the treatment path." Maya held his stare for exactly 1 second, then looked back at the monitor. 94. She said nothing more, just kept doing her job, managing the 4, watching the waveforms, talking softly to a man who couldn't answer her, because that still mattered. His wallet had been thrown clear in the crash, so for now he was just a John Doe. 6 minutes later, his wife arrived, mid-40s, bruised cheek, a split lip held together with a butterfly bandage, holding herself together through sheer willpower. Behind her, 3 identical 7-year-old girls moved in a tight, scared little cluster, their father's build in miniature. The smallest one clutched a beat-up toy, a little handheld radio painted faded green and black, the kind of thing dragged through one too many moves to still look store-bought. Maya's eyes caught it for half a second before snapping back to the monitor. Morrow was pulling info from the wife, no cardiac history, blood pressure meds she couldn't name, very healthy, very strong, she said, before catching herself and looking away. "He's in the best hands," Morrow assured her. The monitor read 91. The smallest girl had drifted from her mother, staring at Maya with that unnervingly clear-eyed focus only kids seem to have when they're piecing something together. "Hi," Maya said quietly, not breaking focus from the patient. "You okay, sweetheart?" The girl didn't answer right away. She studied Maya's hands, the 4-line, the machines. Then she looked back and said, "Plain as day, you look like her." "Like who, honey?" "The one in Daddy's story. The radio lady." Something cold moved through Maya. Not fear exactly, more like that split second before you step off a ledge, when you already know what's coming and there's nothing left to do but let it happen. She kept her hands steady. I think you might have me mixed up with someone, she said. The girl shook her head with total childlike certainty, glanced at her sisters, then held up the toy radio. Daddy said the radio lady saved everybody. Said her voice was one you could trust, like it was always right. Your dad tells great stories, Maya said. Then the girl pressed the button on the toy, and it let out that cheap electronic crackle. And in a voice clearly copying something she'd heard 100 times, she said, Raven 6, this is Ghost 13. Danger close. Waiting on your mark. The trauma bay didn't go quiet. Alarms were still beeping, the vents still cycling. But something in the room shifted anyway. The way it shifts when you realize you're not alone in the dark anymore. Maya didn't move. She kept her eyes locked on the monitor, kept her hands exactly where they were. But something must have flickered across her face, because Priya looked up from across the table with an expression like she'd just witnessed something she had no words for yet. And then the man on the table opened his eyes. Heavy, dark, fighting through the fog of pain and crashing blood pressure. He turned his head slowly and found her. He breathed. Don't try to talk, Maya said. Save your energy. I know your voice, he rasped. Sir, stay calm. 14 years, he said. I've heard that voice in my head for 14 years. Ridgeline 7. You talked us out. The monitor screamed an alarm. 86. Morrow spun around, all business now. He's crashing, fluids wide open. Get me a repeat echo. Maya was already at his side, stethoscope out, and this time the muffled heartbeat was unmistakably worse, the neck veins bulging with textbook clarity. Tamponade, she said, not raising her voice, just stating fact. The fluid's expanding. He needs a needle in his chest right now before he arrests. Morrow, probe still in hand, said, I need to confirm. There's no time to confirm, Maya cut in. Pressures in the 80s and dropping. JVD's positive, heart sounds are muffled. That's Beck's triad. You don't need the echo, you need the needle. Morrow's eyes hardened. Tran, you're a nurse. You do not, he's going to arrest, Maya said. Argue with me after. A beat of silence. Then Priya, quiet but firm. Pressures 82. Something cracked behind Morrow's eyes. Not enough to admit she was right out loud, but enough for the doctor in him to override the ego. Get me the pericardiocentesis kit, he snapped. Maya already had it in her hands. Morrow's hands, whatever else could be said about him, were skilled. The needle found the pericardial space on the first try, and dark blood flowed back into the syringe, 30 cc's, just enough to change everything. The numbers on the monitor started climbing, 91, 96, 101, and color came flooding back into the man's face like someone had flipped a switch. His breathing eased, his eyes sharpened. Morrow stepped back, peeled off his gloves with the practiced calm of a man putting himself back together. He'll need the cath lab for evaluation. Get cardiothoracic on the phone, he said to the room, not looking at Maya once. She didn't need him to. What she needed was to survive the next 4 hours without anyone looking at her sideways, because the man on that table had just recognized her by name, and his daughter had just said a word out loud that nobody in this hospital, this city, or this entire quiet life she'd built was ever supposed to hear. Raven 6. She hadn't heard that name spoken since the day she stood in a debrief room in a building she couldn't name, in a city she wasn't allowed to disclose, and signed away a piece of her life that legally no longer existed. She'd been 26 then, the youngest person in that room by 8 years, and the only woman. The transport team arrived to move Darian to cardiac, and in the controlled chaos of it, Maya slipped back, found a wall to lean against, and made herself breathe evenly, a skill she'd learned long before nursing school, one that transferred cleanly into this life. Keep your body calm while your mind runs at triple speed. She watched the wife get guided toward the family room, the 3 girls trailing behind, the smallest one still clutching that worn toy radio. As they passed, the girl looked up at Maya and gave her one slow, serious nod. The kind only a 7-year-old who's just decided something important can give. Maya looked away first. She had a full shift ahead of her, other patients, charts, meds, that same busted suction line in Bay 3 nobody had fixed. On paper, it was just another day. But that name was out there now, floating through the building on the voice of a child who had no idea what she'd just cracked open. And the man in the cardiac unit, the man whose life she'd basically just saved, regardless of whose hands held the needle, knew exactly who she was. She grabbed fresh gloves and went to check on Bay 2. The hours dragged on the way hospital hours always do, messy and overlapping, nothing running on schedule. Maya moved through it quiet and efficient, barely glancing toward the hallway leading to cardiac. At 12:47, Pet called. Dr. Morrow wanted to see her now. She'd known this was coming, just not exactly when. His office had carpet instead of that cheap linoleum everywhere else. A small luxury that told you everything about hospital politics. He didn't offer her a seat. Close the door, he said. She did. I want to talk about what happened in the trauma bay, he said, voice measured, performing reasonable. You repeatedly challenged my clinical judgment in front of staff and family. That's not acceptable in my department, whatever the outcome. The patient's pressure was crashing, Maya said. His presentation met every criterion for tamponade, which you then diagnosed and treated. After I told you to. What matters is he's stable. What matters, Morrow said, leaning forward, is that this department runs as a team with clear roles. Your role is to support the physician, not redirect, not contradict, not perform. He paused. I've talked with Pet. We're moving you to General Medical for the rest of the month. You can request a return pending performance review. Maya kept her face level. That's your call to make. It is. I'll be documenting this morning's incident as a matter of protocol. This is a professional matter, not personal. Both Maya thought but said, understood, and turned to leave. The man you admitted this morning, Morrow said behind her, apparently he's someone important. Military. Cardiology's saying people are coming. He said it like he wanted to sound casual about it. I don't know what that has to do with you, if anything. Maya turned back. Nothing, she said. It has nothing to do with me. She walked out, shut the door, and stood in the hallway for exactly 3 seconds before forcing herself to move. Reassigned to General Medical, fine. She'd handled worse. But one thing had already lodged itself in the part of her brain that never stopped running assessments. Morrow had mentioned the military visitors before she'd even left the room, not as a threat. He didn't know enough for that yet, but as a signal, maybe an unconscious one, that the ground beneath all of them was already shifting. Instead of heading straight to General Medical, she stopped by the family consultation room near cardiac. She had a legitimate reason, an incomplete handoff note. The wife was there, coffee gone cold in her hands. Her daughters slumped around her the way exhausted kids do once the adrenaline finally drains out. The smallest one had dozed off against her mother's arm, the toy radio still in her lap. Maya knocked softly on the doorframe. Sorry to bother you, I was one of the nurses in the trauma bay. Wanted to check in before I head to another unit. Need anything? The wife studied her, careful and tired. No, thank you. They said he's stable. He is. Cardiology's excellent. A pause. Were you the one who said it was his heart? The whole team worked together. The doctor at the desk said a nurse caught it first. Maya said nothing. The wife held her gaze, the kind of direct stare people get when they've run out of patience for dancing around things. Darian's going to want to thank you personally. He takes things like that seriously. He doesn't owe me anything, Maya said. It's the job. He'll still want to know. That's when the smallest girl stirred, opened her eyes, and found Maya standing there with the kind of accuracy only a half-asleep child seems to have. Are you Raven 6? She asked, simple as anything. The other 2 girls looked up. The wife went completely still. I'm just a nurse, Maya said steadily. The girl shook her head. Daddy says Raven 6 has a voice that doesn't shake. He says when everything got really scary, her voice never shook. She studied Maya for a second. Your voice doesn't shake. Maya held her gaze a moment longer. Get some rest, okay? Your dad's going to need you when he wakes up. Then she turned and walked back down the hall, past the nurse's station into the stairwell, where she stood alone for 30 seconds doing the things she'd learned to do in rooms that officially didn't exist, breathing until her hands stopped shaking before she went back to work. What she didn't know yet was that 2 black SUVs with federal plates were already pulling into the parking structure. She didn't know Darian had been conscious for 40 minutes and his very first coherent request had been to contact his command. She didn't know that the name she'd buried for 14 years had already triggered calls across 3 different cities to 3 different people who'd been waiting, in their own ways, for exactly this thread to surface. She was still on General Medical when Priya found her, wearing an expression Maya had never seen on her before, careful, deliberate, the look of someone carrying news they don't quite know how to hand over. There are people in the hospital, Priya said quietly. Federal badges, Navy ID. Asking about the trauma team from this morning. She paused. Asking for you specifically. By name? Priya shook her head. By description. They showed a photo at the nursing station. Kayla pointed them down the hall. What kind of photo? Old. Military. You looked younger, different hair, in uniform. Priya met her eyes. But Kayla still knew it was you. The hallway suddenly felt a mile long. Where are they now? Nursing station on 3. Morrow's with them. Priya hesitated. He looks like he's figuring something out he didn't know before. Maya straightened her spine, leveled her shoulders, steadied her breathing. Old training kicking in automatically. She finished her chart notes and headed for the elevator, then stopped cold. Coming around the corner from the stairwell, moving with the deliberate pace of a man whose body was still recovering but whose presence still commanded the room, was Darian, gown on, for tape to his arm, cardiac monitor clipped to his finger, 2 cardiology nurses trailing behind him looking like they'd given up trying to stop him and switched to damage control. He spotted her instantly. Maya Tran, he said, loud enough to carry. Heads turned. Priya froze. Down the hall, 3 men in dark suits with federal credentials stopped mid-stride. And behind Maya, unhurried footsteps approached. Dr. Garrett Morrow, who'd followed the agents from the trauma floor and had just heard a floor nurse's name spoken in a tone that didn't match her job title at all. Maya stood in the center of the corridor. 14 years of carefully laid bricks, one quiet city at a time, and now the man she'd once guided through darkness from a position that officially never existed was standing in a hospital gown, saying her name like it was something he'd been carrying his whole life. She looked at him, at the agents closing in, at Morrow recalibrating in her peripheral vision. Then Maya Tran, who'd spent 3 years disappearing, stood up straight, looked Darian Vale dead in the eye, and said clearly, without a single tremor, Admiral. The word hit the corridor like a physical blow. Not sir. Not Mr. Vale. Admiral, full rank, full history, 14 years packed into 3 syllables everyone processed differently. The cardiology nurses froze. Priya turned her head slow, like she just realized the building she worked in wasn't what the blueprints claimed. One of the federal agents touched his earpiece. Morrow said nothing, just stood there, recalculating everything, and Maya could practically watch it happening behind his eyes. The specific discomfort of a man realizing he'd been confidently, completely wrong. Darian studied her across the 15 feet of hallway, and something in his face finally settled, not relaxed. He was still pale, still moving carefully, but settled, the way a compass needle settles once it finds north. Checked myself out, he said, which was flatly untrue, and everybody there knew it. You should be in bed, Maya said. Probably. He took 2 steps forward, and his body seemed to file a formal complaint. My command's here. I figured they'd want to talk to you. Assumed right. He looked at her a beat longer, jaw working like he was choosing between versions of what he wanted to say. A decision most people don't have to make while hooked to a heart monitor in a hospital gown. You saved my life, he finally said. Twice now. The surgeon performed the procedure, Maya said. After you told him to, Darian said simply, not pushing it, just correcting the record the way a man used to accurate reporting does. Maya didn't argue. She turned instead toward the agents, who'd closed the gap while they talked. The one clearly in charge, compact, sharp-eyed, 40s, stepped forward with a Naval Criminal Investigative Service credential. Tran, she said. Senior Agent Carla Voss. We'd like a few minutes. I'm on shift. We've cleared it with administration. Maya glanced at Morrow, watching this whole exchange with the look of a man rapidly understanding the ground had shifted under him, and he had no idea which direction to catch himself. Fine, she said. Give me 5 minutes to hand off my patients. She did it in 4. She briefed the charge nurse, updated 2 charts, left a flagged note on a medication schedule, and walked with Agent Voss and her team to the conference room at the end of the hall, the one with the uncomfortable chairs and the view of the parking structure, and sat down across from 3 people who knew more about her than this hospital ever would. Darian lowered himself into the chair beside her, the nursing staff finally accepting defeat and posting one of their own outside the door like a witness to a decision they wanted no part of. Voss opened a folder but didn't slide it across. We've been running verification since the Admiral regained consciousness, she said. The name he gave us required a level 3 clearance query just to confirm. That tells you something about the file itself. She paused. It came back 38 minutes ago. Your name's in it. I know it is. Can you confirm for the record that you served as a military intelligence specialist and combat coordination operator under the designation Raven 6, in support of classified naval special warfare operations? I'm not going to confirm classified details in an unsecured conference room in a civilian hospital, Maya said flatly. A flicker crossed Voss's face. Not quite amusement, but close. Fair. Let me tell you what we actually need, and you tell me if you're in. She closed the folder. The Admiral's collision this morning wasn't an accident. The temperature in the room dropped, not literally, but Maya felt it, that particular chill when a suspicion becomes a confirmed fact. She glanced at Darian. His jaw was tight. I didn't want to say it in the hallway, he said. The vehicle made deliberate contact at highway speed. Voss continued. Drivers still at large. The car was reported stolen 3 days ago out of Sacramento. She placed a photo face down on the table. We believe this was targeted, connected to an active investigation the Admiral's been leading. What does that have to do with me? Maya asked. Possibly nothing. Possibly a lot. We're still mapping it out. Voss held her gaze. What worries us is that your name surfaced in a classified file the same morning a federal officer was targeted. Could be coincidence. You don't think it is. We don't know what it is. That's why we're talking. Maya leaned back, glanced at the ceiling briefly, an old habit she'd never quite broken, running the numbers in her head. Someone accessed that file before I did, she said. The level 3 query. Who ran it first? Voss's expression shifted slightly. Sharp question. There was a prior query, for days ago. From a terminal we haven't fully traced yet. The room went quiet. So someone was hunting for me, Maya said. Not exactly a question. Hunting for the Raven 6 file, Voss corrected. Whether you were the target or just something they stumbled onto, we're still working out. Maya sat with that. For days ago, someone accessed the file. 3 days ago, a car got stolen. This morning, Darian got run off the road. The pattern wasn't random, it was a countdown. Has anyone at this hospital been told who I am? She asked. Not yet, Voss said. We wanted to talk to you first. I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible. That might not be up to us, Voss said, glancing toward the door. The Admiral's presence is already drawing attention. Command protocol kicks in when he's down. Calls go up the chain fast. Your proximity to this is going to end up documented whether we like it or not. Darien spoke for the first time since Voss started talking. I'm not letting anything happen to you, he said. Whatever this is, whatever it touches, I need you to hear that. Maya looked at him, pale, exhausted, still wired to a monitor tracking his own heartbeat, and he was telling her with complete conviction that he'd protect her, and he had the resources to actually try. It wasn't nothing, but it also wasn't the most pressing problem in the room. I appreciate that, she said, but right now I need to understand the size of this. If someone accessed that file, they know my name. If they know my name, they might know where I live. This morning's crash was deliberate, and whoever planned it now knows it failed. She paused. What happens next is the question. Voss studied her with the look of someone quietly revising their opinion upward. Same question we've got, she said. The meeting ran 40 minutes. By the end, Maya knew 3 new things. The operation Darien had been running centered on defense contracting fraud that had compromised classified procurement channels. Whoever wanted that investigation buried had serious resources and serious motivation. And the file query from 4 days ago had come from inside a federal network, meaning the leak wasn't external. It was inside the house. She walked out of that room with a strange kind of steadiness. Not because the threat had disappeared, but because now she could actually see its shape. What she wasn't ready for was Morrow, standing near the nurse's station with no clinical reason to be there, which in hospital terms meant exactly one thing. He was waiting for her. My office, he said. Now please, please. That was new. This time he offered her a chair. He stayed standing, a subtle power move she doubted he even realized he was making, the habit of a man who needed height whenever he felt small. I want to understand what's happening, he said. Patient matter, Maya said. Can't discuss specifics. Federal agents came to my hospital. Admiral Vale is a federal officer. There are protocols. They asked for you by name. I was the nurse on duty in the trauma bay. Morrow studied her, visibly struggling to reconcile 3 years of dismissing her with what he just watched unfold in the hallway. It was doing something uncomfortable to his face. The reassignment, he started, then stopped. Try again. This morning I moved you to general medical pending review. I'm aware. That may have been premature. He said it like it cost him something, careful, unpracticed, a man with zero fluency in apology. Maya said nothing, offering him no softer landing than the one he'd earned. Was there something specific you needed, Dr. Morrow? His jaw tightened. The CEO wants a full account of this morning, including the clinical decisions made in that bay. There it was. I'll cooperate with any review, Maya said. I always do. That's not. He stopped again, hands sliding into his coat pockets, staring at the wall like it owed him an answer. What I need to know is whether you intend to turn this into something bigger than it has to be. Define this, Maya said. The disagreement over the clinical approach. She studied him for a long beat. I documented everything in real time. The chart reflects the timeline. If the review board wants to examine the record, it's all there. She stood. Is that all? He didn't answer. She left. The rest of the shift crawled by. They hadn't reversed her reassignment yet. Morrow was clearly too busy managing the fallout with the CEO's office to think about paperwork. So she finished the day on general medical, competent and unremarkable as always, moving between patients while quietly watching everything. How staff clustered, how information traveled, who whispered to who. Old habits. She'd stopped trying to kill them 2 years ago. At 3:40, something snagged her attention. A man near the visitor elevators on the 2nd floor. Not a patient. Not in scrubs. Staring at his phone with the specific fake focus of someone using it as an excuse to loiter. He was still there at 3:55. She didn't break stride. Didn't stare too long. just kept moving and fired off a quick text to the number Voss had given her. Second floor visitor elevators. Dark jacket, gray shirt. Stationary 15 minutes. Not a visitor. The reply came 4 minutes later. Noted. Don't engage. We're aware. They'd already been watching. Good or complicated? Probably both. At 4:20, Priya caught her near the med station, voice low with the particular register of someone who'd debated saying something and finally landed on yes. I need to tell you something, she said. Moro's been on the phone since 1 o'clock. I don't know who, but I caught pieces, your name, something about the military liability. She hesitated. He said he was the one who caught the tamponade. Told whoever it was that it was his call. The hallway went very quiet. He's telling people that, Maya said. He's telling someone that, Priya said. I don't know who, figured you should know. Maya nodded, thinking of her timestamp notes, of Priya who'd been right there watching the numbers drop in real time, of the 2 other nurses in the bay, the paramedics, Darian himself, half-conscious but hearing every word, and the hospital's own monitoring system that logged everything with timestamps, a standard liability safeguard put in place after a lawsuit years before Maya was even hired. Thank you, Maya said. I mean that. Priya nodded, then asked, quieter, were you really, what his daughter said. The code name. Maya looked at the young resident, sharp, fast, unafraid to ask the right questions. The one who'd been in the bay when it counted. I was someone else for a long time, Maya said. Before all this. Is that why you caught it before Moro did? Before anyone? I've worked in rooms where a mistake wasn't an option, Maya said. You learn to see fast. Priya nodded slowly, something settling in her expression. The last unanswered question folding into something steadier. He's gonna try to bury this, she said. Moro. He's scared, and scared people do stupid things. I know, Maya said. Do you have what you need? The chart documents itself, Maya said. I made sure of it. Priya held her gaze another second. Okay. For what it's worth, everyone who was in that bay knows exactly what happened. Maya said nothing, but she held on to that for a second, the small, significant weight of being seen. She clocked out at 5:30, changed in the locker room, and walked to her car through the near-empty parking lot. The man in the dark jacket had vanished from the visitor elevators sometime after 4. She didn't know what that meant yet. She sat in her car for 3 full minutes before starting the engine, dead tired, not just the ordinary tired of a long shift, but the deeper exhaustion of running on 2 frequencies at once, the visible one and the one underneath, the one she'd spent 3 years trying to shut off for good. Her phone buzzed. Voss. The guy by the elevators made a call at 4:15, Voss said, skipping the pleasantries. We traced the number, burner phone, but the tower it pinged off is less than 2 miles from your hospital. A beat. Someone's running surveillance on Callaway Bay Medical. We don't know yet if it's you they're watching, the Admiral, or both. Maya started the car. I need to know something, she said. The file query from 4 days ago, the one from inside the federal network. Do you know who ran it? A pause. Not the pause of someone who didn't know. The pause of someone deciding what to say out loud. We've got a strong lead, Voss said carefully. That's not an answer. Another pause, longer this time. The query was routed through a terminal assigned to the Department of Defense Procurement Oversight Division, Voss said, each word deliberate. We've narrowed it down to a specific office. There's a name attached to the access log. Maya reached the parking structure exit and stopped at the barrier, waiting for it to lift. Tell me the name, she said. You might know him, Voss said. He runs a consulting contract with 3 defense firms. All 3 currently under review as part of the fraud case the Admiral's been building. A beat. Colonel Leonard Ashby. Retired from Naval Intelligence 8 years ago. He was my commanding officer, Maya said. The name sat there in the car with her. Heavy. Yes, Voss said quietly. The barrier lifted, and Maya pulled out into the early evening. the ordinary indifferent city spreading out ahead of her, both hands steady on the wheel, that knowledge sitting like a stone in her chest. The man who'd trained her, who'd built the entire framework of what she was capable of, who'd personally shaken her hand on the day she separated and told her she'd served with distinction. That man had pulled her file 4 days ago, and 3 days after that, someone had tried to kill Darien Vale on a highway. She didn't drive straight home. Instead, she headed for the waterfront, the public lot overlooking the bay. Dark water flat and still under the evening light, and sat there 11 minutes letting the full weight of it settle. Then she called Voss's direct line. "I need a meeting," she said. "Tonight. Not at the hospital. We can arrange that. I need everything you have on Ashby. Everything. If he pulled that file to find me, I need to know why, whether I'm a loose end to him or something he thinks he can still use. We'll go through it together." "One more thing," Maya said. "Morrow, the trauma surgeon. He's been telling people he's the one who caught the tamponade. That's not what the record shows, but he's trying to shape the story before the review starts." She paused. "I'm not making it a federal issue, that's a hospital matter, but it's going to surface, and I want it on record that I flagged it to you before it became a complication." "Noted," Voss said. "Anything else?" Maya looked out at the water. "Pull Ashby's travel records for the last 2 weeks. Anywhere in or out of Northern California." A pause. "And Voss, whatever you find, I want to see it before you decide what to do with it." "Why?" "Because I know how he thinks," Maya said. "I know what he does when he's covering something up. I've seen it before. A beat. I just didn't know I was watching it happen to me." The call ended. She sat with the water in front of her, thinking about her old commanding officer, the man who'd sealed her file, told her the world would be safer because of what she'd done in rooms that officially didn't exist. He'd pulled that file 4 days ago, and somewhere in an office she hadn't set foot in for 14 years, in a life she thought she'd buried for good, something was being calculated. Not whether she was in danger, she was already past that question, but whether the danger had started the moment she walked into that trauma bay, or the moment Ashby saw her name in a file and started running numbers of his own. Her phone buzzed again, not Voss. An unknown number. She stared at it, then answered. Silence on the line. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 14 years, older now, lower, with the particular rasp of a man who smoked when he was stressed. "Maya," the voice said, "you should have stayed quiet." The bay lay flat and dark ahead of her. "Bit late for that," she said. A pause. "I know where you are," the voice said. "Have for 3 days." Maya checked her rearview mirror. The lot behind her was empty. "Then you know I'm not running," she said. The line went dead. She sat there holding the dead phone for exactly 4 seconds, then dropped it into her jacket pocket and started the car. Ashby had known for 3 days, which meant he'd known before the collision, before the hospital, before any of it had blown wide open. He'd run the query, found her, tracked her to Callaway Bay, and then someone had put a stolen car on the same stretch of highway as Darien Vale, and Ashby had been watching it all unfold from wherever he was, with the patient detachment of a man who'd built a career making things happen from a distance while keeping his own name off every piece of paper. She knew exactly how he operated because he'd taught her how he operated. That was the part sitting heaviest in her chest right now, heavier than the threat itself, the specific weight of trusting someone's architecture, letting them build something inside you, and then finding out that architecture had a completely different purpose than the one you were told. She drove north along the water, away from the hospital, toward the older part of town where the streets narrowed and traffic thinned out. She needed to think, and thinking, for her, required movement, the low-stakes physical motion that kept the reptile brain occupied so the rest of her mind could actually work. Ashby had said he'd known her location for 3 days, which meant the surveillance at the hospital, the guy by the elevators, was his. Not federal, not Voss's team. His. And if he was running his own eyes on the hospital, he had access to resources well beyond what a retired officer with a few consulting contracts should have on short notice. She pulled over near the Old Canary district and called Voss again. Ashby called, she said, no preamble. Didn't identify himself, but I know that voice. Said he's known my location for 3 days and I should have kept quiet. A working pause on Voss's end. Not surprise, calculation. Pulling tower data now, Voss said. The guy at the hospital today, I think that's his asset. Not federal, not connected to whatever contractor you're chasing. He's running his own operation. That tracks with what we're seeing in the access logs, Voss said. Ashby ran 2 more queries after the initial file pull. One's a property record search in Callaway Bay County. The other, a pause. A staff directory query for Callaway Bay Medical Center. He built a file on me, Maya said. Knows what I do, where I work, probably my address. 3 days of work, and now he's calling me directly, which means something changed. His timeline moved. She paused. Why? What changed today besides the crash? The Admiral survived, Voss said. The night sat quiet outside the windows. A lone fishing boat drifting somewhere out on the black water. Its light a slow orange pulse. If Darian was supposed to be out of commission or worse, Maya said, and instead he walks out of the cardiac unit and says my name in front of federal agents, Ashby's plan just collapsed. He can't contain the file from a distance anymore. He can't contain me from a distance anymore. She exhaled. He's pivoting. That call wasn't a threat. It was a test to see how I'd respond. What's your read on his next move? He'll try to discredit the situation before it escalates. He's got people inside DoD procurement who owe him favors. He's gonna try to make this look like something it isn't. She paused. And he'll try to get ahead of whatever evidence Darian's team is putting together. The fraud case touches people connected to him. He's on a clock now. The Admiral being hospitalized bought him time. The Admiral walking into a hallway and saying my name in front of NCIS agents just took that time away. Same read on our end, Voss said. We're moving faster than planned tonight if you're in. I'm in, Maya said. Where? The location was a federal field office 20 minutes south of Callaway Bay. Tucked inside a building that pretended to be an insurance agency, the kind of place that didn't advertise what it actually was. Maya drove there with the windows cracked despite the cold, letting the night air move through the car, checking her mirrors with the same careful attention she'd once used in places where checking your mirrors was a matter of life and death. Nobody followed her, or if they did, they were better at it than she'd expect, which was itself worth noting. The meeting stretched 2 hours and 40 minutes. Voss had 4 other agents in the room and a DoD liaison who mostly stayed silent, taking notes with the focused intensity of someone whose entire job was documentation. A map covered one wall, Callaway Bay and the surrounding county marked in red and blue, tracking asset positions, surveillance coverage, and Ashby's known network. Maya looked at that map and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not comfort, exactly, but recognition, the specific clarity of a situation finally showing its true shape. Ashby's consulting work, Voss's team explained, ran through 3 defense firms holding procurement contracts over the past 6 years, comms equipment, medical logistics for forward bases, surveillance systems. The investigation Darian had spent 8 months building suggested 2 of those 3 firms had overbilled the government north of $40 million. The discrepancies buried across dozens of subcontracts. Ashby's name never touched a single one directly. That was his signature move, deniability built into the architecture, but his consulting fees from those same firms totaled just under $3 million, and the timing lined up too cleanly with specific contracting decisions to call it coincidence. He's not just covering up a financial crime, Maya said, studying the timeline. He's protecting a network. The firms are fronts or partial fronts. The overbilling's the revenue stream, but the real purpose is access. Access to what? Who's buying the surveillance equipment, Maya said. Voss met her eyes. We don't fully know yet. That's the piece Darian was closing in on before this morning. Close? His team had an evidence consolidation meeting scheduled for tomorrow before going to the federal prosecutor. Voss paused. Still happening. The Admiral's insisting from a hospital bed. His cardiologist cleared limited activity. He's very insistent. Maya almost smiled. It didn't quite make it. He would be. We need you to consider something, Voss said, leaning forward slightly. You've got a read on Ashby nobody else in this room has. You trained under him. You know his patterns, his exit strategies. We've built this case from the outside. What you've got is from the inside. We're asking you to consult, formally, tonight, so we can get ahead of whatever he's planning before tomorrow's meeting. Maya looked at the map, the red dots marking Ashby's estimated network. 3 days, she said. He's had my location for 3 days. What's he actually done with it besides put a man outside the hospital? We found one more thing today, Voss said, nodding to the agent beside her, who turned a laptop toward Maya. A formal complaint, filed anonymously through the hospital's credentialing portal at 7:42 that morning, 14 minutes after the Trauma Bay admission began. It named Maya by name, department, hire date, and alleged falsified education credentials, unverified certifications, discrepancies in her background check demanding immediate review. None of it was true. All of it was formal enough to trigger a review. He filed this before the collision, Maya said. He had it ready before this morning even started. The accident was called in at 8:51, Voss confirmed. He was already moving against you before the operation even went active. The room went quiet. The complaint was precise enough to trigger review and vague enough to guarantee delay. Not designed to destroy her, designed to get her removed from the building quietly, procedurally, on paper that looked completely legitimate. Does the hospital know? Maya asked. Notification went out at 4:53 this afternoon, Voss said. We intercepted a copy. The board flags anything touching federal employees, since the hospital takes federal funding. Which meant administration had known for hours, which meant Morrow's afternoon phone calls, the ones Priya had overheard, suddenly had a second layer. If administration was already flagging Maya's credentials, Morrow's version of the morning became the version on record, unchallenged. Clean. 14 years out of the game, and Ashby was still that clean. He's trying to get me suspended before the evidence meeting, Maya said. That's our read, Voss confirmed. And if I'm suspended under an active credentialing complaint, anything I say about that Trauma Bay or about Ashby comes from a nurse with a discredited file. He's discrediting you before you can speak, Voss said. Maya sat with that a moment, then asked the question that mattered most. How long has Morrow known? We don't know if he was contacted directly. The notification went to the CEO's office, PET, and the head of nursing. He may have heard through PET, through the CEO, or not at all yet. It matters, Maya said, because if he got that notification, his calls today weren't just about protecting his version of events. They were about how to play an administration that suddenly had grounds to move. She paused. He'd see it as an opening. He's not dishonest, he's insecure, which is worse, because insecure people make self-interested calls and dress them up as principal. The DoD liaison scribbled something. We need to move tonight, Voss said. The complaint goes active tomorrow morning. Automatic hold on your credentials. No access to clinical areas. What do you need from me? Everything you know about how Ashby builds an exit. What he does once he's exposed but not yet cornered. What he sacrifices, what he protects, where he runs first. Maya thought back through 14 years of distance. A man with a careful voice and careful hands who taught her that the most dangerous operator was the one you could never prove was even in the room, and that the first rule of deniability was always documentation, the right paper, in the right place, said the right way, before anyone asked the wrong question. He's already filed the complaint, she said. That's not the exit, that's the delay. The real exit is something else. Something he's been building since the day he ran that first query. She looked at the map again. He's known where I was for 3 days, and he had this complaint loaded before the collision even happened. That means he planned for 2 outcomes, one where the crash succeeded, and one where it didn't. We're living in Scenario 2. What does Scenario 2 look like? Voss asked. The Admiral survives. Worst case for Ashby, because the investigation keeps moving. So he has to accelerate, get ahead of whatever Darian's team is walking in with tomorrow. She paused, working it through. He's not running. That's not who he is. He's going to try to invalidate the evidence itself. You said he's got contacts inside procurement. That means there's a mole feeding him information about the case. Enough to know exactly where the weak spots in the paperwork are. We've suspected a mole for 6 weeks, Voss said quietly. No confirmed name yet. Then that's what you need from me tonight, Maya said. Not his psychology. The mole. Show me who's had access to the evidence package, and I'll tell you which one of them fits how Ashby recruits. That name and everything it would unlock before sunrise was still hours away. But for the first time since a 7-year-old girl had said 2 impossible words out loud in a trauma bay, Maya Tran wasn't hiding from what she used to be. She was using it. And whatever Leonard Ashby thought he'd buried 14 years ago was about to dig itself back up, one careful, unshakable step at a time.